What is up, my friends? We are back. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Mr. David Lynch, and it's been a week since I've been away. But David, Connor came on and stepped up. I mean, thoughts on Mr. Crosby as a presenter? That was his first go.
Yeah, it was a super sub. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. In fact, you might be worrying about your job coming back, I think. Although
I
I
tell you, I
wasn't sure
watched
if...
it and I was a bit uneasy. I won't lie, David. I watched it. I thought he's making this look a little bit too easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was good.
but when we spoke after it, I didn't think he loved doing it. So I think you might be okay on that front. I think he prefers being behind the scenes. So, but you did do a very good job. I agree.
So you were on the stage show with us in Liverpool, and I'm a bag of nerves for these things, but he just strolls up and talks away and doesn't bother him. But as you said, he doesn't like being in front of the camera. It's not his thing.
Yeah, he's not got the ego like me and you. I think to want to be front
That's
and
it. That's
center.
exactly what it is, David. That's exactly what it is. So how are you coping through the international break anyway? 1 week to go.
Yeah, do you know what? Honestly, I kind of do enjoy these because it is so utterly relentless when the football's on, in terms of, two press conferences a week, two matches, you're going back and forth to Anfield, back and forth to the AXA, then trying to fit in everything else you're trying to write. So from a purely selfish perspective, I do quite like these, and to have the free weekends, and just like a little bit more of a chilled atmosphere when it's on. And they're particularly good when Liverpool are doing well, because I think you go into an international break and they're sat there top of the league, no one can knock them off the top, and there's no games to potentially lose or whatever. So it's I do quite like that. But yeah, if it lasted much longer, I'd be kind of climbing the walls. So it's I will be looking forward to the real stuff coming back.
It's tough to get into a rhythm when you've got September, October, November international breaks. It must be a nightmare for the coaches as well. Speaking of nightmares, bit of a mixed bag for our players. I want to touch on our captain for a second. Obviously, this benefits us hugely, David, but he was sent off for the Netherlands, which means that he's going to return and be with the boys and prepare for Chelsea. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on some rumours that there's a 300k extension for Virgil van Dijk. I don't know if you've heard some of those rumours floating around. Seems like a big number, David.
Yeah, I can't say I've heard anything fresh on this, or I'd be kind of, I don't know, in terms of whether he gets a pay bump at this point of his career, whether that's likely. I'd be interested to see about that. But no, I've not really heard anything concrete on that. Still got a sort of similar situation, as they always say. Virgil very keen to stay, Liverpool keen to keep him. That's one of the, quite optimistic about that one getting done, I think, out of all three of them, really. But, as much as they will push for Trent, and Salah's an interesting situation. I've spoke about the difficulties of that before, but I think with Virgil, I think there's a belief that he can play on at this level for much longer. He's playing at an incredibly high level, and he wants to stay. So a lot of ingredients there that are good, but no actual concrete developments at the moment. And I would kind of take some of the reports with a pinch of salt, to be honest. I think this one's going to kind of come out of nowhere. I think that's true with all the contracts, really. You won't hear anything and then it'll be done, in the way that we sort of saw with Jarell Quansah, for example, because the players don't want these dragged out in public. So so no real developments, but that doesn't really mean to panic or otherwise. It's just as you were, really, with the contracts, I think.
And on Jarell, I know Connor touched on this with you last week. Great for the club to get him tied down. I'm sure that's going to be a boost for Arne Slot, who obviously thinks very highly of him as well. And just securing the future there of a very talented young man.
Yeah, it's just a shame we haven't seen more of him this season. But you've got to say that's fair enough with the way that Konate is playing, the way that Van Dijk is obviously playing, and he will always be in there. So, but clearly he knows he's young. He knows he's got a lot of games ahead of him just this season, and then obviously far beyond that as well. So, there'll be a lot of opportunities for him to show what he's about. But it's important to get players like that to reward the development so far and show him that he's going to be a big part of Liverpool's future, because I think there's absolutely no doubt that's the case.
Well, if you look back to the summer, Newcastle were valuing him around 60 million at that point, David, and that's before we tied him down to a new deal. So there's obviously an understanding and a feeling within the game that he is a top talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and the English tax as well, in the sense that, he's homegrown, so that adds a few million on. But, when he came in last season, he deservedly was ahead of Konate in the pecking order. He played his way into that position and stayed there for good reason, really. He's really comfortable on the ball. He's big and strong. He's not the quickest, but he's not slow either. He's just got and it's his calmness at the age he is, and he looks like a far more experienced player than he is with the way he plays the game. So yeah, he's got an awful lot of qualities, and I think it's not just Liverpool that appreciate that. As you say, it's a lot of other clubs as well. He is a phenomenal talent.
So I don't want to jinx anything, but if you're on a slot right now and you're looking at how this international break has gone so far, we're always concerned there's going to be injuries when we send the boys away. But Virgil back earlier, Mohamed Salah also back earlier. Alexis McAllister sat out the first game. I mean, on Mo, pretty perfect. And I have to say, fair play to the Egyptian manager and the Egyptian FA for looking at the Mauritanian pitch, the players, the way they played in the first game, and thinking, look, we need to protect our lads here. A little bit more of that in football at times, Dave, but wouldn't go astray.
Yeah, I mean, on stuff like that, it absolutely helps to have good relations with the FA, which is, the FAs of various countries, which I know is something that Michael Edwards was big on in the past when he was previously at Liverpool. So maybe this is the first sign that those relationships are being built again, and that Liverpool are making sure that, look, say to the Egyptian FA, look, let's work together on this. Let's make sure that we both get the best version of Mohamed Salah that we possibly can. And if that means missing a not too important game on a pitch that's dodgy and there's a real risk of injury there, then that's great to hear that they've all come to that decision together and collectively feel it's the right one. So yeah, really, really encouraging and just great news that he'll be back, getting training, be fresh and be fully ready for that Chelsea game, because he always loves to score against them. So I'm sure he'll be ready to get another.
Yeah, what a game, by the way, to welcome us back to the Premier League on Sunday. I've got to be honest, though, the Mohamed Salah situation for me is the one I'm probably most sceptical of about an extension, purely because of the Michael Edwards factor. Now, I think you and I both agree Virgil's a bit of a unicorn in this because of the position he plays. He doesn't rely on his pace. But with Mohamed Salah, I think I understand both sides of this. I understand his side wanting, obviously, to be respected and acknowledged for what he's done. And I definitely do understand the club side of not wanting a Mesut Ozil situation, not wanting a situation with Alexis Sanchez where suddenly this player falls off a cliff. What do you think Michael Edwards is thinking? Now, obviously, this is conjecture. You're not in Michael Edwards' heads. But if you were in his position, what would be your thoughts on the Salah situation?
I think that is a big part of it, is a kind of fear that you're going to lock yourself into a contract whereby you end up paying him for what he did rather than what he's going to do. Now, you can get ahead of yourself with that. I mean, he's still producing the goals and the assists at ridiculous numbers, isn't he, at the moment? And I'm sure the judgment will go far deeper than that in terms of how they assess things and whether they do hand out that contract or not. But it is, you've got to move with a little bit of caution around that, because that drop off can happen so suddenly. We've seen it in so many players. You've got to have that worry of, were the signs maybe there towards the back end of last season after he got that injury that maybe there's some decline coming. It just is a really tough one, particularly because he's your highest earner in the squad as well, and you can't be handing out that contract and then it not being kind of worth that. I think the biggest disagreement that's going to be there maybe is potentially around sort of length of contract and how much Liverpool are allowed to protect themselves by Mohamed Salah, in terms of, if he's not asking for a 3-year, which I think would be very, very difficult for him to get, given it's essentially 4 years from now when that will expire. Is he willing to compromise, be it, taking a 1 year or a 2 year? I mean, I know, you think back, and even Chelsea when they were the big spenders back under Roman Abramovich, players used to get to a certain age and only get 1 year contracts. So it's not, even for a club that has an awful lot of money as they did back then, even they were very cautious about giving out contracts to players who were reaching a certain age. So it's not unusual. I don't think it's penny pinching. I just think they've got to be cautious about it. So yeah, it's an interesting one in terms of how that one's going to play out, and what they kind of eventually decide with that, because yeah, I just think there's going to have to be compromise on the players' side. But I think the most encouraging thing, isn't it, is that the players pretty much said publicly that he would really like to stay, and that's a really, really good starting point for any sporting director in a contract negotiation.
So I'm mindful of something Dr. Ian Graham said, and I haven't had a chance to read his book, but by all accounts, it sounds like it's a fantastic read. He was speaking about the value of every pound a football club spends, and one of the things that he said was that for Liverpool in particular, there was more value in investing in wages than there was in going and investing in new signings. It's less risky, I think he said. Now, with Mohamed Salah's situation, I guess you've got to also weigh up, if he does leave, what's the cost of replacing him, and how do you go about that?
Yeah, exactly. And also the kind of, I would say that Liverpool have not signed, since Mane and Salah have not signed an attacker really of that level. I know Jota's been a very good signing. And Gakpo looks a decent player, Luis Diaz as well. But you would say that none of them are of the level of peak Mane and peak Salah So, if Liverpool were to lose Salah and those guaranteed goals and assists he gives you every season, they would have to go into the market to replace him. And then you're entering a market where Liverpool haven't quite been able to reproduce that magic in the last few years. So it's a risky market. So again, like you say, that there is almost value in just saying, that we know what we've got here. Let's pay him in the wages. If we can reach a compromise on 2 years, that's maybe the perfect outcome. And it just saves you an absolutely huge headache in the transfer market, because that's what that would be. It would be extremely difficult to get anyone who comes in and has a first year like that, or any of his subsequent years, really. So yeah, if you can push that back a couple of years and maybe start a succession plan further down the line, then with a younger player coming in to eventually replace him, maybe that's ideal, and maybe that's something that Liverpool will really factor into this.
And also looking at Ben Doak as well, it gives him a little bit of time there as well. He's done very well so far, going out to Middlesbrough on loan. Looks like he's settled there, enjoying his football as well. So you could see what happens there. Now, Trent won himself 500 quid last night with his free kick. Jack really shows him 500 quid. So look, this is a situation where I'm fearful of if he does leave. And what I mean by that is, I can make an argument for Mohamed Salah to leave. You could make an argument for Virgil to leave. Now, we all want him to stay, but you could make an argument because of the age factors and whatever. Trent just feels like this is the one that the club will suffer the most with the fan base if it doesn't get done. I'm respectful of Trent's thought process that he doesn't want to play it out in public. I can absolutely understand and appreciate where he's coming from. But you know yourself, when he's away with Bellingham and Bellingham's hiding inside birthday cards and you see all these images, you do get concerned. And I'm just wondering, do you agree with maybe what Paul Joyce said, that it feels like the club could have taken their eye off the ball a little bit on the Trent situation? Or is it a case of he wanted to let it play out, then you had obviously the Jurgen Klopp situation, then he wanted to see who the new manager was, then he wanted to settle in with the new manager and see what the style was like, and of course Trent's other assessment that he wants to make sure that the club are going to challenge, because he doesn't want to just win trophies in the early part of his career?
Well, that's it. I think there's all those mitigating factors really are worth mentioning, and the Jurgen one is particularly significant in that the manager couldn't sit down with him and say, I'm going to be in 2 years, this is our plan, this is what I want for you, this is how we see you developing further and getting even better. He wasn't able to do that, and so sporting directors come in now and inherited a terrible situation, really, one that I don't envy him for, and it's difficult. But that said, even with that mitigation, I just don't think there is a world where he leaves Liverpool this summer and it's in any way deemed acceptable, because I just don't think it is. You can't let a local lad of this level of quality, arguably the best player in his position in the world, so influential on what the team does and how it plays. You can't let him slip through your fingers to Real Madrid. I mean, for one, it kind of bakes in that sort of pecking order that you feel from Real Madrid's games against Liverpool in recent years, which is that they've just consistently beaten them. But also, it's like I say, it's a local lad. You should be doing everything to say we're going to build the entire team around you. You're going to be our main man. You are going to be the captain. So there is that mitigation that exists, but I do not think anyone would be able to potentially dress it up as anything other than a huge failure to lose Trent. Because the fact is, yes, Real Madrid might tempt him, but this could have been wrapped up 18 months ago, 2 years ago, potentially. Even with that, even with the Jurgen Klopp situation, if you'd have had a sporting director in place who was overseeing the entire project, that would have said, been able to go to him and say, okay, well, the manager's future might be up in the air, things might change, but I'm always going to be here. This is what we're going to do. These are the players we're going to sign. This is where we're aiming to be over the next few years, and you are at the heart of it. And Liverpool, because of that chaos behind the scenes that they've had, multiple sporting directors, they haven't been able to do that with Trent. And then you throw in the Jurgen situation and it's all kind of come to a head now, and he's heading towards his last 6 months. I mean, at the end of the day, if they do solve it in the next couple of months before it gets to that really important 6 month mark, then you say, okay, dodged a bullet, it's sorted, fair play to the new hierarchy that's come in. But I think there's no way they're going to escape criticism if it doesn't get resolved soon.
I wanted to just touch on Joel Matip, if I could, for a minute, because he announced this week that he's going to be retiring from football. And I have nothing but positive, glowing things to say about Joel. Not only about him as a person, and he always came across so lovely, warm and welcoming to anyone that came into the club. And He was good in some of the videos the club put out as well. But his football, David, was quite simply sensational at times. His ability as a centre back will, I think, always be appreciated by Liverpool fans, perhaps more so than others. In his pomp, he was brilliant. Now, injuries obviously caused a bit of a problem, but that announcement that he's retired got me thinking, where does he sit in the pantheon of free signings for Liverpool? You know, you've got James Milner in there, you've got himself, Gary Mack, for those of us who are a little bit older as well. What a player, David. I just wanted to celebrate him for a minute because he's such a great part of our success on the Jurgen.
Yeah, I think so much of it, his actual ability kind of goes under the radar in terms of, because, you know, a lot was made of his character, and he's a great character. I remember doing a one-to-one interview with him at Melwood a few years back when I worked for the club, and just thinking he's kind of a shy character really, and you know, doesn't like to make a fuss of things, but still quite like dryly funny, and you know, you did occasionally see that sort of sneak out in some of the videos and the way he was around the squad. But you know, underpinning all that, the reason he was there was that, you know, when he was fit and available, he was a world-class footballer, absolutely dominant in the air, you know, Canate style, in terms of we're waxing lyrical about what he's doing aerially at the moment, and it's Van Dijk like. You know, Matip was that domination in the air, then he threw in this ability to bring the ball out from the back and use it so comfortably, and he was, you know, he just really was a top class defender, and it always helps having Van Dijk alongside you. He was genuinely brilliant in his own right, and I mean, gets the assist in a European Cup final as well, which is a, you know, nice thing to have. Wins everything possible with Liverpool. He really was an absolutely class act. And in terms of where you rank him in free signs, I think maybe the injuries just nudge him down a little bit. But the peak of his performance, I would say, was, you know, and so I would maybe rank Milner higher myself in terms of, just because of the amount of games played. But I think in terms of the peak level of performance, Matip v Milner or Matip v any other free signing that Liverpool have had, I think Matip is top on that basis. He, you know, if he'd just stayed fit a little more frequently, you know, he'd have been right up there in terms of top Liverpool signings, full stop. So, you know, that's how highly I rate him, really. And yeah, it's a shame he's had to retire, but obviously we know he's had those problems with injuries, and that's finally told, really.
An incredible signing, absolutely. I mean, I always have a fondness for Gary Mack because I know what an influence he had on Steven Gerrard in his career. But Joel Matip coming in from Schalke as he did, it's a shame that injuries in his body have let him down and he's had to retire. But it's also a privilege that we got to watch him play in a Liverpool shirt. And I think he'll definitely go into the cult hero category at Liverpool for us fans. I know Red Bull's a dirty word at the minute because of the whole Jurgen thing and because of the situation with well, Red Bull in general and how they're not really liked in Germany. But I do have to say, £13 for the Travelling Reds over for the European Cup game, David, against Leipzig. You got to acknowledge that and say fair play.
Yeah, that is unbelievable, isn't it? Considering what you would pay for some of the Premier League away games as well, where it's just constantly, you know, Premier League clubs trying to find ways to rip fans off. And what I kind of find amazing about this as well is that in terms of the ticket prices as well for some of these, you know, European games away from home, you know, people mistakenly think, oh, well, you know, German clubs can charge that because, you know, they don't bring in as much money as Premier League clubs. But match day and general admission ticketing is such a drop in the ocean for Premier League clubs. The big difference between the two leagues is the money that comes in from television. That is it, full stop. There's just no need for fans to be squeezed in this way. It makes no difference. It's not the reason that the Premier League teams are better than the German teams. That is purely down to the TV money. So yeah, it is great to see that, refreshing, and just wish we could see that a little bit more frequently, really, in English football, because there is no need to fleece fans. So yeah, credit to Red Bull for that, and credit to all German football actually for the way that they actually treat supporters.
Yeah, I mean, I remember speaking to some people who go to football in Germany. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in a lot of the games, you get free public transportation with your match ticket and a few other bits. They are setting the tone, aren't they, for how to treat supporters with regards to not with the over commercialization of football that we often see, unfortunately, in the Premier League with the money involved.
Yeah, that's it. Like I said, just no need for the Premier League to do it. I mean, what the Premier League, their attitude should in fact be, well, we make all this money off television, and this is the clubs collectively. We make this money off television. We do not need to squeeze the fans. It doesn't really make that much of a difference to our bottom line whatsoever. You know, it's just totally pointless, really. And yeah, so I'll never understand why they keep doing it. But yeah, as long as they keep getting away with it, I'm sure they will, which is a real shame.
Now, again, sticking with the Premier League, this is a bit of a heavy subject, so I'm going to lead into it. Premier League clubs only have around 3 weeks left to submit a legal notice about potentially launching a claim for damages against Manchester City relating to the 115 charges. Now, the 1980 Limitation Act underlines that entities must submit a legal notice to reserve suing rights within 6 years of initially learning of a contract breach. Now, the reason I brought this up, David, was one, to get your thoughts on it, but also it's 6 years now. 6 years since this investigation's been launched. And the fact that we're going to see Premier League clubs have to register the potential to sue Manchester City for breach of contract before we even know the outcome, it does speak to how long this has been dragging on.
Yeah, it just speaks to how utterly depressing the whole affair is, really, and the fact that football, in English football, finds itself in this situation. It should never have come to this, really. I mean, you know, once you allow the kind of invidious influence of state ownership to seep into your football, then this is what you're opening yourselves up to. And, you know, it is interesting with that deadline coming. I'm sure there will be clubs queuing up to do that and register an interest in potentially soon, because, you know, we don't know which way the case is going to go. But, you know, judging by the APT case, City weren't able to get what they wanted out of that one. You'd like to think that some of the charges are probably going to stick in the 115 case. So it's that's the whole thing. It's just utterly depressing that it's come to this, and you know, you're kind of sick of talking about it, but it has to be talked about, and you don't want it to just go away, because ultimately, if there's wrongdoing has been found to be done, then it has to be punished. But it's the fact it's been going on for 6 years and we're still not there. The dream situation is that a verdict comes in quite soon, and then once we've got that verdict, City accept the punishment, or otherwise they get found completely not guilty or whatever, and it just goes away. But I also think there's going to be further legal challenges beyond that. So yeah, it's just a depressing chapter that's going to continue to get worse over the coming months and years, to be honest.
It is sad because we have a great product in the Premier League, the most watched league around the world, so much money coming into the game, and it feels like there's almost one bad actor in there who are potentially trying to start a civil war within the Premier League over certain aspects. And as you said, dragging on for 6 years, I think fans are just growing tired of it, and they just want the case to be closed one way or the other, so everybody can know what they're facing up to. And also, you know, you're probably asked a lot, I know I'm certainly asked a lot about potential punishments. How do you even begin to guess or figure this out? Because this could be probably the biggest scandal in sport in my lifetime if this is proven.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only indication we've got is what, for example, what happened with Nottingham Forest and Everton around their charges. Now, these were singular charges they got found guilty of and ended up in for financial breaches, and they obviously ended up in sort of, you know, up to 10 points being deducted. I know there was appeals and it was back and forth and changed a little bit, but, you know, that was the initial sanctions laid down. And you think, you know, if for one breach that you fight is to get that many points deducted, and you're talking about, well, it's more than 115 charges, isn't it? I think it's something like around 130 now. You know, 130 charges. You're talking about relegation into, well, potentially out of the Premier League, out of the Football League entirely. That's the only sort of measure we've got. And really, the Premier League wouldn't have to make that many charges stick to get that verdict either, I imagine. And one of the things I always say is that one of the verdicts I can imagine going in their favour is non-compliance, because I think City have been fairly clear in that they don't wish to comply with the Premier League, and they don't believe in the rules, and they don't want to hand over documents. I think that stuff is pretty well established. So if they make any of that stick alone, you're never even getting into the financial doping and the cheating around that, then, you know, that could potentially be really, really sticky for City. And if that does prove to be the case, then yeah, you're potentially looking at something as harsh as several relegations, really. So it's a really interesting one to see how that kind of plays out. But as I say, equally depressing, and we are still a long way from finding how that's going to play out.
From my own perspective, and again, this is just my view, not David's, watching Pep Guardiola sit there and say, we will accept these as we always do, and we want a speedy trial, and we want this to come. And you're thinking, that's the antithesis of everything that you've been doing. Like, you've been slowing the investigation down at every opportunity. We know they're not going to accept the verdict. I don't think either side will, in all honesty. I think we're set up for an appeal one way or the other. it's quite galling to sit here and see him unchallenged at some of these questions where, he's lying through his teeth, but he's got that Pep Guardiola smile that melts some journalists and they seem to just let him away with it. I don't know. I'm not going to ask you on it, but it bugs me personally.
Well, I'm just going to say I feel for Pep in a sense, in that you can't, if you just wish to accept it on face value, and maybe we should always believe the best of people, that he probably did have nothing to do with it, and there is every chance that he has actually been lied to about, if this is to be proven that he genuinely has been lied to face and doesn't think that this has actually gone on. If it does prove to be true, by the way, only alleged at the moment. I don't want to get myself in trouble here. But, if that were to prove to be the case, then, you could kind of accept that in terms of, maybe he had been lied to. Maybe that was the case and he didn't know anything about it. But yeah, I don't think we've seen any evidence from City's side that they're absolutely desperate to clear the name. I think this would have moved a lot faster. And that's why I mentioned non-compliance, in the sense that, been several reports having there about certain documents not being sent over and things like that. So I think City, if they were completely innocent, would have, could have moved to clear the name much quicker than this. But maybe we'll find out as the trial progresses in terms of why that's not been the case or whatever. But I'm sceptical, to be honest.
Well, as you said, we'll wait and see what happens. We're probably talking January, maybe around that time when we get this verdict. A couple of quick transfer stories, Dave, before I let you go. Orkun Kökçü of Benfica has been a name that's been linked. Apparently, he's got a €150 million release clause, but €80 million will get it done. Obviously, Arne Slot would know him very well. And also sticking with Benfica, Alvaro Fernandez, a left back as well. His name has come up. Anything to those two stories for you?
Yeah, so Kokcu, I think, was one of those that he was linked when he was at Feyenoord before he moved to Benfica. And so maybe, you looked at his kind of numbers and what he was doing there. Kind of makes sense profile-wise as maybe someone Liverpool would look at. But I think now he's made that move to Benfica, that release clause is there. I think, if they'd have wanted him, they would have got this wrapped up before he went there. I'm kind of sceptical that he's anyone that they're going to chase. And in terms of left back, it's an interesting one. I've no doubt that Liverpool are keeping an eye on left backs. I think it's a clear area of the squad where something could change. I think Tsimikas might have a think about that backup role coming into this season, and beyond that, whether he wants to move on and play a little bit more football. Although I think he's done a good job so far this season. But I think the ideal situation for Liverpool would be to have Robertson as he kind of ages out, and then a younger one who can come in and really challenge for his place and eventually kind of step up and be the one to come in. So I've no doubt that's an area that Liverpool are absolutely looking at, and one that I think, you could see some change there over the next 12 months, but nothing concrete at the moment, not thinking that that's anything that definitely will be done in January or anything they'll be really pushing for there. I'm sure he's one of many players in that position to keeping an eye on.
Appreciate your honesty and your input as always, David. Just before I let you go, I always like to ask what you've got coming up over the next week or so on your Substack and, of course, on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, so Substack, I'm gonna write this week about why I think Liverpool should sign a midfielder actually, and why I think that's something that is a potential for January, and definitely beyond that, and why they still do need reinforcements there. So keep an eye out for that. And YouTube at the moment, kind of making the most of the fact it's a bit quiet at the moment, but we'll probably have some kind of analysis coming out over the next, before the Chelsea game, in terms of what's to come and looking ahead to those challenges and how big a part of the season is coming up now.
Always appreciate your time, David. Always an interesting chat. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video as well, and get yourself over to check out David Lynch's YouTube channel and, of course, his Substack. We'll catch up with you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.